The Hungarian election just concluded, marking the end of Viktor Orban's 16-year rule. Orban, once called Europe's most influential nationalist leader, a man who defied the European Union and openly sympathized with Russia, will no longer hold office. His opponent, Peter Magyar, won with a stunning two-thirds majority, winning 138 of 199 parliamentary seats and is set to become the next prime minister. And with his victory, Hungary's gaze is shifting from east back to west. This East versus West ideological battle is what defined the election. But what does look East actually mean? Why did Orban choose Russia and China over Brussels? And why did Hungarians finally reject it? To understand this, we need to understand Hungary itself. Hungary, a country whose geography and history have made its people among the most geopolitically unlucky in Europe. Hungary sits right in the heart of Central Europe. It is a flat, rich, and fertile plain surrounded by mountains. But this beautiful geography is actually a curse. Because it has no natural defenses, any empire that wanted to control Europe had to conquer Hungary first. In 1526, the Ottoman Empire swept in and split the country apart for 150 years. When they finally left, the Austrian Habsburgs took total control. The Hungarian people fought back fiercely, most famously in 1848 under Lajos Kossuth, but their revolution was brutally crushed by the Russian army. Eventually, a compromise in 1867 gave Hungary some freedom back, sparking a golden age where Budapest exploded into one of the most modern, wealthy cities in Europe. But that golden age was destroyed by World War I, 1920. After the war, Hungary was punished with the Treaty of Trianon. It was a national disaster. The country was sliced apart, losing two-thirds of its land, access to the sea, and one-third of its population. Even today, over 3 million Hungarians live outside the modern borders. After World War I, the nightmare continued. Hungary lost its freedom all over again, locked behind the Iron Curtain as a Soviet satellite state for 46 long years. By the 1980s, the communist economy was failing. The country was exhausted, the people were furious, and out of that deep, historical anger, a brand new political force was about to be born. In 1988, a group of university students started a new political party called Fidesz. They were not conservatives. They were fiery, pro-Western liberals who wanted free markets, democracy, and zero Soviet control. One of their co-founders was a 25-year-old law student named Viktor Orban. In 1989, Orban gave a fearless speech demanding Soviet troops leave Hungary, making him a national hero overnight. But being a hero didn't mean winning elections. When free voting started in 1990, Fidesz barely won any seats. This is when Orban made the most important strategic decision of his life. He totally transformed Fidesz from a liberal youth group into a hardcore Christian conservative party. The rebrand worked perfectly. In 1998, Orban won and became prime minister at just 35 years old. His first term was moderate, even leading Hungary into NATO. But in 2002, he lost his re-election by a razor-thin margin. This painful defeat changed him. He spent the next 8 years in the shadows, watching the socialist government struggle. In 2004, Hungary finally joined the European Union. It was supposed to be a happy return to the West, but many Hungarians just felt like they were bowing down to a new empire. Then, the 2008 global financial crisis hit. The socialist government completely imploded under heavy scandals and bankruptcy, forcing Hungary to go for the IMF bailout package. Public trust completely evaporated. The country was angry and desperate. In 2010, Viktor Orban returned. He didn't just win, he absolutely crushed the opposition, taking a staggering 263 out of 386 seats in parliament. Orban called it a revolution in the voting booth. He wasn't exaggerating. With this massive new power, what he did next would completely redefine Hungary and Europe forever. With that massive supermajority, Orban moved incredibly fast to lock down his power. Within just 18 months, he completely rewrote the Hungarian constitution to embed strict Christian values and strip away the power of independent courts to check his laws. He also changed how elections work. He shrank the parliament down to 199 seats and redrew the voting maps with some called gerrymandering. This ensures that Fidesz party was practically guaranteed to win the majority of the seats. Orban proudly called his new system an illiberal democracy. To understand what that means, think of it this way. In a normal democracy, you vote for leaders. But you also have free press, independent judges, and strong rights to keep those leaders in check. In Orban's illiberal democracy, the only democratic part is the voting booth. Once his party wins the election, they get to control absolutely everything else in the country without anyone questioning them. To make this work, he had to silence his critics. He captured the media, ensuring that they come under one national broadcasting network. Then, he packed the courts with Fidesz loyalist judges. He had successfully taken over the media, the courts, and the election system. He was untouchable at home, but by doing this, he put himself on a massive collision course with his biggest and most powerful critic, the European Union.
The European Union has voted in favor of taking a punitive measure against Hungary for not abiding by its core values. In a big blow to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, for the first time ever, the European Union passed a motion to trigger an Article 7 procedure against a member state.
Article 7 is an infringement procedure at the disposal of the European Commission to punish or sanction EU member states who are out of line with EU law in the area of fundamental freedoms and rule of law.
Members of the European Parliament voted to punish Hungary for breaching EU values. For the first time, they agreed to launch Article 7, a procedure that could lead to Budapest losing its EU voting rights.
The European Union has begun the process of clawing back hundreds of millions of euros in funds meant to go to Hungary.
It's your fate, it's your future, but don't force us to do so. So that's what we call the offer of tolerance, what I have made several times to Brussels. I said, guys, you can create whatever migration system you would like to do, but don't force Hungary to do the same thing.
In 2015, the massive refugee crisis hit Europe. The EU told all its member countries they had to accept a certain quota of refugees. Hungary was the very first to say absolutely no. Orban even held a national vote, and an overwhelming 98% said no to the EU quotas. He didn't just say no, he built a massive physical fence on the Serbian border to keep people out. He also launched a fierce Stop Soros campaign, accusing foreign billionaires of trying to control Hungarian politics. If you want to know how George Soros once crashed the British pound to make $1 billion, check out the video link in our description. Back to Hungary. The EU was furious. Orban was breaking all the rules of normal European democracy. But what could the EU actually do? They threatened him with their nuclear option, something called Article 7. Article 7 is a rule designed to punish any EU country that destroys democracy or human rights. If activated, it strips that country of its voting rights in the EU. Now, in the EU, every single country has veto power, meaning any major decision has to be 100% unanimous. But to pass Article 7 against Hungary, the EU needed every other country to agree. Luckily for Orban, his strong conservative ally, Poland, had his back and blocked it. Hungary was saved. European Union was worried as Orban's led Hungary being in the Union gave him massive leverage. Because he held that golden veto power in Europe, he could block any major EU decision. This made Orban extraordinarily valuable to countries outside of Europe, specifically Russia and China. In retaliation for his behavior, the EU froze $22 billion in funding meant for Hungary, citing massive corruption. But many believe the real reason was Orban's controversial new strategy, his aggressive Look East policy. Orban called his new master plan the Eastern Opening. Instead of relying only on the European Union for money and support, he decided to point Hungary straight toward Russia and China. First, let us look at the Russian bit. Russia is a massive partner for Hungary. A huge amount of Hungarian gas comes straight from Russia through two main pipes. One is the Turk Stream pipe in the south. The other is the Brotherhood pipe that runs right through Ukraine. When the war in Ukraine started, Hungary strategically tilted toward Russia. Orban even blocked European money meant to help Ukraine. Why? Because the Brotherhood pipe inside Ukraine was damaged, and Ukraine was very slow to fix it. Hungary also signed a massive secret deal in 2014 where Russia gave them 10 billion euros to build a giant nuclear power plant, completely bypassing European rules. Then came the Chinese bet. China began showering Hungary with massive investments. A huge Chinese company is building a giant electric vehicle factory in a Hungarian city. It is the largest Chinese investment in European history. China is also building modern phone networks, planning a university, and funding a huge railway from Budapest to Belgrade. Orban desperately needed these Chinese funds to boost his slowing economy. But why does China invest so heavily in Hungary? Remember that golden veto power? China knows that having just one European member in their pocket is incredibly valuable. In return for the money, Orban blocked Europe from criticizing China about human rights, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. He basically gave Beijing a diplomatic shield right inside Europe. Orban actually had a very clear geopolitical logic. He believed the West was failing, America was divided, and Europe was weak and slow. He thought the East was rising, and Hungary could play both sides to get the absolute best deals. For 16 years, this master plan worked perfectly, until suddenly, it all fell apart. By 2024, Orban's empire began to crack. Prices skyrocketed, housing became unaffordable, and people were sick of the corruption. Out of this anger stepped Peter Magyar. He was a former insider who knew all of Orban's secrets. He formed the PISA party and promised true patriotism without the corruption. On 12th April 2026, the people made history. They gave Magyar a massive landslide victory, completely crushing Orban's 16-year rule. Now, the pendulum has swung. Hungary is looking west again. Magyar promises to fix the courts, stop the corruption, and bring Hungary back to the European Union. But his biggest fight is just beginning. He has to tear down the massive, deep institutions that Orban spent 16 years building.